Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much to our wonderful organizers here for HCI 2025. It's been an amazing show. It's about to get more amazing with this great panel. Joining me on the stage here, His Excellency Dr. Nabeel Koshak, CEO and board member at SVC, Saudi Arabia, Dr. Dongsu Kim, CEO of LG Technology Ventures from California, United States, and Jonathan Ortmans, president of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, also based in the United States. And I'd like to start off with you, Your Excellency, Dr. Nabeel. You've done so much to build this ecosystem, really from the ground up. And the work that you've done has really been patient work and one that's involved a lot of labors of love, but the results are in front of us, they're tangible. And I want to start by talking about, you're both an investor, but you're also a fund of funds investor to jumpstart the ecosystem. How do you assess whether SVC's strategy aligns with national priorities here in Saudi Arabia around talent development and also workforce transformation in Saudi Arabia? And then actually, if we may do sort of that in a two-parter, I think if we could also learn a little bit about how SVC assesses the impacts of your investment beyond financial returns, which are also important.
Sure. Thank you. I think I will start by, it's great and honor actually to be part of the Human Capitality Initiative. And I'm glad that also venture investment is highlighted through this event with great leaders in this ecosystem globally, not only locally. But I think the interesting thing about venture capital, how Vision 2030 has highlighted the importance of Vision 2030, the importance of startups and SMEs, and the backing of innovation and great entrepreneurs for many reasons. For the diversifying the economy, job creation, and multiple, I would say, developmental impact, but also the financial returns that could happen through this experience. Since the fund size is $3 billion, since inception, we invested in more than now 56 funds. We are across multiple sectors, multiple stages. Sometimes we act as a gap filler in the ecosystem to make sure that there are enough risk capital investing in innovative ideas and backing entrepreneurs and innovators. And luckily, I think the outcome since inception started Q4 2018 to today, the multiplier effect is almost 4x. So each dollar we fueled in the market actually stimulated money from private investors, high net worth individuals, corporates, family offices. And that's actually an indicator how now lucrative is the venture investment actually happening in Saudi Arabia. And then also these developmental KPIs like the number of jobs, the gender diversification, the equity, and all other developmental KPIs has been set, and among the targets what we measure on annual basis to make sure that we are doing this in a disciplined, patient, continuous, and persistence is very crucial for venture capital. I like that this is a patient capital. It's a long-term game, but the results also out of these funds that we backed and through our direct co-investment activities, the total portfolio reached 800 plus startups actually. And definitely EdTech is part of the sector that we are keen to back indirectly through the funds or indirectly.
Yeah, and the fund has now, 4x since you started, so that's amazing, and in size. And you mentioned sort of, I want to move over to corporate venture capital with LG Technology Ventures. And I sort of want to ask about you're investing, really from LG's side into technologies that, will benefit your company sort of long term. Mm-hmm. But you are a venture investor as well. Sure. And I want to ask a little bit about how you as a corporate venture capitalist and just as a venture capitalist in general, how can we sort of invest in technology, and how do you invest in technology in a way that drives returns but also doesn't have as much risk at underfunding capabilities and talent and making sure that talent and capabilities keep up with the investments that you're making?
Sure. So all venture capital, is a very active investor, right? You invest and then you help your portfolio and all that. Being corporate venture capital, we have another additional angle that we can tap into. So we invest in promising startups, and then we help them get connected with the right people within LG, promote partnership. In many cases, we advise on our portfolio companies on how to work with a big company like LG, because it's just very different cultures. Many times there's also different language problems, or you name it. I mean, there are a lot of things that that makes it a collaboration very difficult. We try to facilitate that so we can accelerate the growth of the startups. So.
Okay. Jonathan, you've been quite active in Saudi Arabia. We've shared the stage recently together, in fact. Tell us about what you're doing in Saudi Arabia and all the work you're doing currently here in the kingdom.
Yeah, so I think we've seen, I think Dr. Nabeel and I have had the great privilege of watching the growth and the emergence of the venture capital, and particularly in our perspective, the angel space emerging, in our context, we've had a nice snapshot vision every year for the last 6 years, initiated by the MISC Foundation, now led by Monshaat. We've had the privilege of hosting the Entrepreneurship World Cup, where we've actually been able to attract up to 100,000 startups from around the world to participate in an exercise of getting down to 100 that we bring to Riyadh, for example. And that finals at Riyadh has been a very interesting snapshot for us for where funding is flowing and where the startups are focusing. And I'd noticed that we had, for example, last time at least 3 of those 100 companies operating in the human capital space. And we're seeing a growth of more than 30% of those companies entering the field. So I think from an HCI perspective, it's really important to see that there is experimenting going on the actual startup level. And I'll just add, briefly, I mean, the very exciting thing about this conference, and one of the reasons that I love to participate in this, is that it is on the cutting edge, I think globally, of thinking about how we rethink human capabilities in the workplace. And what I mean by that is, it used to be, we're all familiar with companies like Lattice and Gusto and some of the people that have entered the space in terms of, what it used to, where capital was going was investing in companies that facilitated back-end operations. And what we're seeing now is startups coming from a younger generation who care about more than the return on investment. We're seeing startups getting created, where it's the experience of the employee, it's the human development of the employee, and of course it's things like inclusion, it's things like what's my work experience going to be like. And I think we've got a new generation of innovators who are creating great opportunities with venture capital support for, I think, a new generation. And we'll come to it, I'm sure, in a minute in this conversation, that will be fueled by AI, and which will equally transform it, but a new generation of what it means to be a company in this space.
Okay. Well, moderating is still non-AI, so I'm still here, maybe for another year, as we joked. Dr. Nabeel, again, nobody really has their finger of the pulse on the ecosystem quite like you do.
Sure.
With your role with SVC, I'd love to ask you about a company or two that is really exciting, is a success story, and is one that has really impacted the ecosystem in an outsized way.
Yeah, I think it's good to highlight or to shed the light on actually amazing entrepreneurs and startups actually being launched here in Saudi Arabia and now going global. And also the companies that are starting globally or regionally and also expanding to Saudi Arabia. We're keen to support these 2 types of companies because that's going to enrich the whole ecosystem when it comes to education technology or edtech. And the first company I just want to highlight, I'm so proud of, which is Classera. Started years back. Now they are operating in more than 40 countries. I think 50% of these countries, they are doing regional, actually, impact or national impact on these countries. And what's interesting about this platform, as they claim to tag it or name it, it's not only a learning management system, it's a learning super platform, where it includes a learning management system, ERP, and financing, payment, and multiple modules, and also a platform actually for education-related services and products. So I think this is one of the interesting startups actually started here in Saudi Arabia and went global. The company now actually also we are so proud that their latest round, which is around $40 million, almost the top, actually, the round in terms of size in the region when it comes to EdTech. And 5 of the funds that we backed, they invested in company. This is the highest number of funds that we backed and invested in a single company. So that's another interesting distinction where it's showing how the ecosystem has evolving. Amazing entrepreneurs here in Saudi Arabia and around the globe actually joining the scene to found companies in Saudi Arabia and going global. I think they reach now around 50 million users globally out of this platform. And their growth potential is amazing. I think this could be one of the potential Saudi unicorns actually that's going to be focusing on EdTech in Saudi Arabia. The other company is also known. They're also participating in the exhibition, so feel free to get more information and know more. And they have a sample, actually, they call it a future classroom or a smart classroom in a way that is more engaging. I think that's going to solve a lot of challenges where governments actually facing globally. One is actually the privatization of school system. The second thing is actually how they can provide quality teacher in remote areas. So these classrooms are conducted with one teacher, but multiple physical classrooms. So they started as a purely online platform. They moved in being a hybrid model where it's actually combining the physical classroom with enablement of technology. So that's actually connect quality teachers to be available in multiple schools, and especially challenging actually to have these quality teachers available in remote schools. They now also operate in 5 countries, so they're going global. And I can't talk a lot about this, sorry, I don't want to take much time. But these are samples of the great stories of great entrepreneurs that are local and regional, that are building companies that are attracting international investors to invest in, but also disrupting the educational system locally and regionally and globally.
Those are great examples, and they're also in the ed tech space, which is particularly relevant to what we're doing here at the HCI. And it's always good when many of your portfolio funds validate the idea. It's always a good feeling. So I want to talk a little bit about, and I want to ask you as well, Dr. Nabeel, after I get to Dr. Dongsu, but I want to talk about trends. Everything in VC is seeing trends as they are now, but sort of looking forward in trends. And I'm wondering if you can talk about some trends that are happening in not necessarily even education tech or the future of work, but trends that may impact that and things that you're looking at from LG's perspective that may have an impact on that.
Sure. So, like everybody else, I have to mention AI.
Yep, there it is. Okay,
really transforming even on the education and also training side. I mean, we invest in companies like Deepal, which uses AI to help train new workers, and it's just become a tool for both structured training, but also a lot of young people just go and use AI to train themselves. I mean, there's so many resources out there that you can use to learn using some of the platforms that's already out there. But I also would like to mention that stepping back a little bit, that the role of venture capital in terms of developing human capability is not fully appreciated. I think for a young person to increase your capability, there's no better tool than starting your own companies, because you will learn so much about everything else that happens in business, right? I mean, you could be a good engineer, but once you start your company, you'll have to learn about how to manage people and sales and marketing and finance and everything else. So I think and because of that, a lot of governments are now promoting entrepreneurship and supporting the venture capital industry.
Great.
Yeah, that's the sort of hard skills and soft skills that you learn both in success and failure. Yes. Jonathan, I want to ask you a similar question. What are some areas that venture should be investing in the next 5 to 10 years in that horizon? It's hard to say, right? Because everything is changing so quickly. But in your opinion, what are some areas that ventures should be looking at?
Yeah, I think taking the lessons out of this conference, I mean, we have our own conference like everybody every year. It's called the Global Entrepreneurship Congress. It was actually held here in Riyadh in this very building. And it's happening in June in the United States. And it's one of the topics that we're grappling with, which is how much should we predict, because it's happening so fast, for the entrepreneurs and the investors that would be present at that event in the United States? How much should we be focusing on where they should not be concentrating because AI is going to make that area much less investor useful. So for example, if we put it in the context of human capabilities, I actually went back and crafted some notes to myself from what I heard from yesterday. And there's a very consistent and coordinated and common set of assumptions that's coming out of this conference. And I'll be very interested to read what the reports are. But one of the things I'm learning is that clearly there are some areas where AI will not be useful in the immediate future. And one of those is in what you're talking about in terms of entrepreneurs have to learn to operate in unpredictable, uncertain environments. They have to deal, they have to have that risk-taking mentality that allows them to operate in the unknown. Whereas, generative AI technologies tend to operate based upon, what it's actually experienced and being able to gather and analyze in terms of past data. So I think, we're looking, so I think some of the areas that will be extraordinarily important for entrepreneurs to focus on is the more value-based elements of what it means to manage people as, an organization. And then finally, I just quickly pick up on what was said. As you mentioned, I run the Global Entrepreneurship Network. We operate in 200 countries, and I frequently stand on a stage with an elected official, a politician, a minister, who stands up and says, we're so excited to promote entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs create almost all the net new jobs around the world, and very excited to promote startups and new firms in our economy. And then privately, backstage, they'll say to me, I don't really know how many of our jobs are going to come from these new companies. Maybe we're lucky and we have someone good like Saudi venture capital and invest in the right companies and they grow. But they said, the reality is, I will never stop promoting this because of the educational value. So part of the value of what venture and startups do in their experimentation of trying to test ideas, collect data, go through that editorial process of building a company, is they're teaching in its own right. The whole notion of just innovating in the space is indeed, as you indicated, an educational experience. So at the end of the day, it is perhaps one of the best ways for citizens of a country to learn how to do problem solving, to learn how to be independent. Actually, I often talk to corporate venture guys and they say, well, at the end of the day, if that company doesn't work out, those people will be considerably more employable in our company than they were prior to them going out and experimenting with that venture. So I think there's some incredibly exciting spaces. And the only thing I'd say about the ed tech field, and particularly about human capabilities broadly, is that I just want to emphasize a point I made before. It is very, it's not tangibly clear what all of these elements are that will make us better at preparing our citizens for life and for employment and so forth. But one thing we do know is that they're a lot more value-based and they're driven on what a younger generation of employees is looking for. And that's very consistent with the kind of demographic that's trying to create companies and innovate in the space. So I think the venture community should be extremely excited because I think you're going to see some super innovative new ideas coming from a new generation of thinkers that are thinking in the ways that this conference is thinking, not just thinking in the traditional ways. We used to think of ed tech in terms of human resource management, particularly in large institutions.
I want to ask you a similar question, Dr. Nabeel, but I want to sort of anchor it in Vision 2030. We're roughly a little bit over the halfway line with Vision 2030, and part of the vision is diversifying the economy. There's really no better way to do that than having a thriving venture capital scene. And indeed, you have made incredible accomplishments in this area. If you're talking about Saudi Arabia really emerging in the region and as in the world as a leader in venture capital and entrepreneurship. And I want to ask you about how do we go forward and move towards 2030 and 2035 and 2040? What are you investing in now, and what do you see as very exciting and areas in the economy that you think can kind of bring the traction that you've had now over to 2030 and beyond?
Yep. I think in terms of I would tap into like sectors and stages, because when we started, we were sector agnostic, stage agnostic, and that's the nature of the game. Based on the global benchmarking, where we saw other countries launch the fund of funds program, this is where they started, because it's too restrictive. You start with specific sectors and stages. But as the ecosystem evolved, we're seeing how now specific fund of funds that we are now actually launched, NTDP, the National Technology Development Program, launched a fuel initiative, which is a fund of funds for deep tech. And then we're getting now an inflow from multiple government entities to do a fund of funds that are focused on specific sectors. Definitely, we witnessed in Saudi Arabia the evolvement of the fintech sector, where that represents 30% of the portfolio since inception. And then we have logistics, e-commerce, and then the next wave, I would imagine, would be edtech and health tech. We already have a couple of companies on our portfolio, but I think that's going to evolve with the evolvement of the time. Now, filling also the gaps for funding, different funding stages. We started doing the early stage, pre-seed, angel support, investment support, but then we moved into series A and B, and now we're doing, we did one pre-IPO fund now, growth funds, and private equity. There was another gap actually when it comes to venture debt. We also backed venture debt to balance the equity and venture debt. But I think monitoring the ecosystem continuously, that's the key for success, where we discover the gaps and provide venture investors, local emerging fund managers, as well as attracting international investors actually to join the scene. And this is where we invested in top-tier investors globally lately, and they are now already investing in Saudi Arabia. I can just highlight General Atlantic lately, TPG, they did one deal, General Catalyst, they did one deal. They won't come to Saudi Arabia if they don't see this growth potential for these companies in the future. We also witnessed two IPO companies actually venture-backed the last 2 years, and that's gonna re-inject the capital getting out from the public market to the private market, and then keeping the right balance between the funding, that's very crucial. I can see when it comes to edtech, I think that's very important to capture. I liked actually the Minister of South Korea yesterday, and when he mentioned that even governments should act as the public venture capital investor. And we have a discussion at the speaker dinner last night on how this is very important. And I'm sure through our interaction actually with the Ministry of Education, His Excellency Yusuf Binyan, the Minister, and also the Human Capability Development Program is leading this. The alignment also of, I would say, strategies and programs and activities is very crucial. We listened today to the Minister of Human Resources, yesterday the Minister of Investment, where everybody is actually trying to tackle this. How is this linked with Vision 2030? How these disruptions and technologies globally are affecting the educational system, and how can we capture this and be a frontier country when it comes to embracing, adapting, changing, pivoting, being agile and lean when it comes to technologies that are disrupting the many sectors, but definitely the educational sector is one of the, we talked about Gen AI, my colleagues at the panel here highlighted this, but I'm sure that we are just scratching the surface. The pace of technology development happening globally and the disruption we need to capture with this space. And I believe Saudi Arabia, with all these programs and initiatives, are on top of it to make sure that we are keeping up when it comes to disruptions and technologies disrupting many sectors, mainly education in this context.
And that is a perfect ending note. I wish this would go on for another hour, but we're out of time. Gentlemen, thank you very much. If you would please give a round of applause to the esteemed panelists here. Thank you.